Imagine this, a place where the Mississippi River just slows down, widens out into this beautiful lake, with huge bluffs on either side.
Hmm.
It's steeped in history, got these charming little towns, amazing nature, bald eagles everywhere, apparently.
Yeah.
But there's also this whole other side to it. Some real environmental stuff going on. Makes it really complex, really interesting.
Absolutely. And we've sort of gathered up a bunch of info articles, some research, notes to really explore Lake Pepin, this specific part of the river, and the towns around it, Minnesota and Wisconsin side.
Yeah, our plan is to sift through all this, pull out the key things, the history, what it's like today, the spots to check out, and like you said, that environmental picture too. So bring it to life for you.
Right, because Lake Pepin isn't just, a wide spot. It's this hub where people and nature meet. It's got a long story, and it's still unfolding.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Where exactly is this lake? What's the geography?
Right. Well, Lake Pepin is technically part of the Mississippi River, but it functions like a natural lake. It forms the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin for about 21 miles.
So it's naturally formed, just the river widening out there.
Exactly. It's much wider than the river upstream or downstream, creating this big open water area. It's a really significant feature in the whole upper Mississippi system.
Got it. And once you know where it is, then you start looking at all the towns dotted around the shoreline. The sources we looked at really highlight a few key places on both sides.
They do. You've got Pepin, Nelson, Stockholm, Maiden Rock over in Wisconsin.
And then Lake City, Red Wing, Wabasha on the Minnesota side.
Right. Each one's got its own kind of personality.
Let's maybe start with Pepin, Wisconsin. Sounds like it gets a lot of visitors, maybe day trips. There's this cafe mentioned, the Harbor View Cafe. Sounds almost famous.
Oh, yeah, the Harbor View. The notes were pretty specific. If you want dinner on a weekend, you better be there by 4:45 p.m.
4.45.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For face a long wait. And no reservations.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
But Pepin's known for something else too, right? Someone famous.
That's right. It's the birthplace of Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Ah, Little House on the Prairie.
Exactly. There's a museum for her in town, open seasonally, May to October.
And wasn't there something about a cabin too?
Yep. If you drive about 7 miles up into the Bluffs on County Road CC, there's a recreated version of their cabin, the Little House Wayside. You can see it anytime. It's just not furnished inside.
Cool. So 2 ways to connect with that bit of history.
And Pepin also has Villa Balexa Winery, which seems like a pretty big deal now.
The winery. Okay.
Yeah, tastings, they have food, El Forno, a Piazza Bellezza events, weddings, even a Christmas market, cooking classes, Sunday brunch.
Wow, they do a lot.
And interestingly, free EV charging stations. Practical touch.
That is practical. Okay, so Pepin sounds packed. What about moving down the Wisconsin side a bit to Nelson?
Nelson's main landmark seems to be the Nelson Cheese Factory.
Cheese factory sounds
Yeah.
very Wisconsin.
Totally. But it's over a century old, and now it's way more than just cheese. They do sandwiches, ice cream, gourmet foods. There's a patio, even a fireplace room for wine and jazz nights.
Wine and jazz at a cheese factory. I like it.
And apparently it's pet-friendly, too.
Good to know. Anything else catching the eye in Nelson?
Well, there's J&J Barbecue for ribs, that got to mention. And then up in the Bluffs, on County Road KK, a place called the Stone Barn. Wood-fired pizzas, wine, beer, but only on weekend evenings.
Sounds like Nelson's a good stop for foodies.
Seems like it. Then further south again, still in Wisconsin, you hit Stockholm.
Stockholm, okay. What's the vibe there?
The notes suggest it's quite artsy, with unique shops
Mm.
near the main intersection, Wisconsin 35 and Spring Street.
Yeah, I saw mentions of Iris and Oak Gallery and Abode, local artists, pottery, fine arts.
Mm-hmm. And you absolutely have to talk about the Stockholm Pie Company.
Oh, the pie place. Savory pies, fruit pies, cream pies.
Yeah.
Ice cream, too. Sounds dangerous.
Definitely sounds like a required stop. There's also the palette gourmet stuff, cookware, cooking classes.
And for a proper meal.
Hoptischen Vine Gastropub gets mentioned, uses local ingredients. And Stockholm even has a performing arts center, wide spot, in an old opera house. Concerts, plays.
It's amazing how much character these small towns pack in. Okay, let's hop across the river to Minnesota. Lake City, apple capital.
That's what they call it. It's home to Pepin Heights, Orchard, Minnesota's largest, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, fall is the time to stop for Honeycrisps.
Makes sense. What else is there in Lake City?
Well, direct lake access, obviously. Hoxsala Park has a sand beach right on Lake Pepin. And there's a walking trail near the marina.
Nice. Any cultural spots?
Yeah, up in the bluffs nearby is the Oak Center General Store. Sounds really cool. It hosts quite well-known folk musicians, draws a crowd.
A general store hosting folk concerts. That's unique. Okay, back to Wisconsin one more time, Maiden Rock.
Maiden Rock offers more of the dramatic nature side of things.
Right, you can grab some pastries, maybe at the Smiling Pelican first,
Okay.
and then head to Maiden Rock Bluff. It's a state natural area, right, on this huge 400-foot bluff.
Exactly. Big views. And it's known for rare wildflowers and especially raptors, peregrine falcons.
Ooh, falcons. How do you see them?
It's apparently just a 10-minute hike up from the parking lot. The notes say there are specific overlooks. The third one looks south, but the fourth one, looking north, is the best bet for spotting the raptors.
Good tip. Okay, moving up the Minnesota side now, towards the Twin Cities. Red Wing.
Yep, about an hour southeast of the cities.
Red Wing has the boots, obviously, but what else? Another theater.
It does, the Sheldon Theater, historic place for concerts and plays. And for food with a view, the Harbor Restaurant and Bar got mentioned. It's across the main river channel. You get there via the High Bridge, known for burgers, music, river views.
Sounds good. And
Yeah.
something about a drive-in nearby.
Yeah, just over the river in Wisconsin again, the Hager Heights Drive-In, twist cones, roasted chicken, classic drive-in stuff.
A nice little contrast. Okay, finally, let's talk about Wabasha, Minnesota.
Yeah?
Downstream a bit, right?
Yeah, about an hour and a half from La Crosse. And Wabasha has some really deep history.
Oldest town on the upper Mississippi.
One of the oldest continuously occupied, since 1826. Named after Chief Wapasha of the Sioux Nation.
And the first white settler was related to him.
His nephew, Augustin Roque, a fur trader, interpreter, he set up posts near the foot of Lake Pepin really early, like 1817 to 1823 maybe. Duncan Campbell settled nearby too.
And there was something interesting about a treaty.
Right, the 1830 Treaty of Prairie du Chien. Article 9 specifically had the Sioux bands asking for land near Lake Pepin for their relatives of mixed ancestry.
Yeah.
This led to these things called Lake Pepin Half-Breed Certificates, which actually became pretty valuable.
Wow, that's a layer of history you don't always hear about. So the town was formerly named Wabasha later, then shortened.
Yep, named in 1843, dropped the W in 1868. Early on, it was all about lumber and steamboats, river commerce, until the railroad came through.
And didn't they use to clam here for buttons?
Yeah, a huge industry. Started for pearls, but then boomed for mother-of-pearl buttons. Peak was around 1913, hundreds of clammers, thousands of tons of mussels harvested.
Incredible.
Button factories in Lake City and Wabasha. It pretty much died out by 1940 when plastics took over.
Fascinating shift. So Wabasha today, so the county seat, has that historic downtown district you mentioned.
Right, 4 blocks on the National Register, and some notable historic churches, St. Felix Catholic, built on land donated by Augustin Roque himself, rebuilt in 1893, and Grace Memorial Church from 1899, which has a Tiffany stained glass window, 3 Marys at tomb.
A Tiffany window. Very cool. But the big draw now maybe is the wildlife.
Definitely the eagles, American bald eagles. Huge population. They nest across the river in the Nelson Bottoms. You see them all the time from fall through spring, especially near the foot of the lake looking south.
And there's a center dedicated to them.
Yep, the National Eagle Center, right on the riverfront. Interactive exhibits, classes, great place to learn about them, maybe see some up close.
Seeing eagles like that must be amazing. What else for visitors in Wabasha? Recreation?
Oh yeah, plenty. Boating, camping, fishing, obviously, golf, skiing in winter, ice fishing. The usual river town stuff.
And didn't it have a movie connection?
It did. Grumpy Old Men.
No way.
Yeah, the writer's grandfather lived in Wabasha, so it has that local tie-in.
That's hilarious. So it's described as a real, true-to-life river town.
Pretty much. Parks, marinas, historic feel. And just north, there's Reed's Landing Brewing Company. Sounds popular. Good food, pulled pork, sweet potato tots, steak, risotto, big beer list, deck dining.
Okay, so pulling all those towns together, if you're traveling around Lake Pepin, you've got tons of options for food and drink, right?
Absolutely. Quick stops like Hager Heights Drive-In or Smiling Pelican, treats at Nelson Cheese Factory or Stockholm Pie, proper meals at Harbor View, Hop Dish and Vine, the Pickle Factory, that one has a deck overlooking the Lake Harbor restaurant, Reed's Landing. Lots of choices.
It really sounds like you could spend days just eating your way around the lake.
You probably could, but there's more than just the towns and the food. The whole area is set up for outdoor stuff too.
Right, like fishing. The sources mentioned guided trips.
Yeah, guided fishing on the Mississippi, covering the whole stretch from Red Wing down past Wabasha, Pepin, Alma. targeting walleye, perch, bass, whatever's biting.
Do they provide gear?
Usually, yeah.
Mhm.
Poles, tackle. The notes give a rough price, like $450 for 4 hours, $550 for 7 hours, for maybe 1 or 2 people. More if you add anglers, up to 4 usually.
Yeah.
Just need your Wisconsin fishing license.
Gotcha. And hiking, too. We mentioned Maiden Rock Bluff.
And Frontenac State Park on the Minnesota side. 13 miles of trails, including an accessible one, known for great views, and like we said, spring wildflowers and warblers in May.
Okay. Are there specific times of year, maybe events, that are good for visiting?
Well, the sources listed a few fall events. Laura Ingalls' Wilder Days in Pepin in September. The Fall Flood Run, that's a big motorcycle rally mid-September. And then early October, there's a Fall Fresh Art Tour on the Wisconsin side, with artists opening their studios.
So fall sounds like a pretty busy, interesting time to be there.
It does, but, talking about being out on the water, fishing, hiking near the shore, it kind of leads us to think about the lake itself, its health.
Yeah, and that's where this other really important part of the story comes in, the environmental side.
It really is important. The sources are clear. Lake Pepin has been officially listed as impaired since back in 2002.
Impaired, meaning what exactly?
Too many nutrients, specifically phosphorus.
Okay, phosphorus. Why is that bad?
It basically acts like fertilizer for algae. Too much phosphorus means excessive algae growth, which can cause all sorts of problems for water quality and the ecosystem.
Right, and where does all this phosphorus come from? It's not just from the towns right around the lake, is it?
Oh, not at all. This is the crucial part. The Lake Pepin watershed, the land area that drains into it, is enormous. It covers roughly half of Minnesota.
Half the state. Wow.
Yeah, think about it, the upper Mississippi Basin, the whole Minnesota River Basin, the St. Croix, the Twin Cities metro area. Water from all that eventually flows into Lake Pepin. You look at a map, it's just huge.
So things happening hundreds of miles away can impact the lake.
Exactly. And the analysis shows the phosphorus comes from a lot of different places across that watershed.
Like what? Farming.
That's a big one. Runoff from cropland and pastures is often the largest source in many areas, like 30 to 65% of the non-point phosphorus. Phosphorus binds to soil, so when soil erodes and washes away, the phosphorus goes with it.
Okay, so soil erosion is key.
Yep. And stream bank erosion, too. That contributes sediment and phosphorus directly. Then you have runoff from urban areas, decomposing leaves, soil washing off, pet waste, fertilizers, even road salt can play a role.
What about, like, septic systems?
Individual septic systems are definitely a factor. The estimates suggest over 100,000 systems across Minnesota might be failing, potentially leaking nutrients.
And then there are the more direct sources. Factories, treatment plants.
Right, the point sources. Municipal wastewater treatment plants, industrial discharges, regulated stormwater systems from cities, those are generally easier to measure and control.
Was there always this much phosphorus?
No, there were natural background levels, but much lower. An estimate for around 1830 was maybe 0.05 pounds per acre per year. It's much higher now. And another tricky thing is internal loading.
Internal loading.
Yeah, phosphorus that's already settled in the lake bottom sediments or even upstream in Pool 2 can get stirred back up into the water by wind or currents, adding to the problem.
So it's coming from everywhere, basically. Farms, cities, stream banks, septic systems, treatment plants, even from the lake bottom itself.
It's a complex mix, and the goal, laid out in water quality plans, is to cut those phosphorus loads way down. Lake Pepin has a specific water quality standard. They want the concentration below 100 micrograms per liter. Right now, it averages around 134.
So still quite a ways to go. How do they plan to get there? Do they need cuts from all those different sources?
Yes, pretty much. The analysis shows they need reductions from both the port sources, like treatment plants, and the non-point sources, like farm runoff. It varies with river flow, so you need to tackle both. They use some pretty sophisticated computer models to figure out how the system works and what needs to be done.
And are things actually being done? Are there programs in place?
Oh yeah, there are major efforts underway. There's the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy, a statewide plan aiming for a big cut, 45% in phosphorus going into the Mississippi Basin by 2025, compared to levels back in the 80s and 90s.
45% cut statewide. That's ambitious. Are they making progress?
They are, especially on the point source side. Wastewater treatment plants have significantly upgraded. The notes mention that by 2014, phosphorus loads measured at Red Wing were down about 31%, mostly thanks to those improvements.
Okay, so treatment plants are doing better. But what about the runoff from farms and cities? That sounds harder.
It is harder. It requires changes across huge areas of land. But there are programs. Minnesota has a buffer law requiring strips of perennial plants along waterways to filter runoff.
Right, buffers.
There's a voluntary program, the Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program, where farmers implement conservation practices and get some regulatory certainty in return. And CREP, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, pays landowners to convert sensitive farmland back to perennial cover like grasses or trees.
Who actually helps farmers and landowners do this stuff on the ground?
Local groups are key. Watershed management organizations, soil and water conservation districts, they work directly with people to implement practices. And there are specific projects, too, like stabilizing eroding shorelines upstream. One example mentioned was at Mississippi Gateway Regional Park, designed to stop hundreds of tons of sediment and hundreds of pounds of phosphorus from washing into the river each year.
So it's happening at different scales, from individual farms to specific projects.
Exactly. And there's even research into new approaches, like the Forever Green Initiative, exploring new types of perennial crops that farmers could grow that might be better for water quality and soil health.
Interesting. New crops.
Yeah, trying to find solutions that work for both agriculture and the environment. And it's worth saying, all this planning and these efforts have involved a lot of input from the public and stakeholders for, well, nearly 2 decades now.
Okay, so bringing this all together, how does understanding this environmental situation change how you might think about Lake Pepin, maybe as a visitor?
Well, it adds another dimension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You see this beautiful lake, these great towns, all the recreation.
Yeah.
But you also realize it's part of this much larger system, and its health is this ongoing challenge that lots of people are working on across a huge landscape.
Right. It's not just a pretty picture. It's a dynamic place grappling with really important issues. The conservation efforts, the science behind it. It's happening right there.
So when you visit, you're not just experiencing the history or the fun stuff. You're also seeing, in a way, a working landscape where people are actively trying to protect this incredible resource. It makes the connection feel a bit deeper, maybe more relevant.
Yeah, I agree. Lake Pepin really does offer this incredible blend. You've got the history, the culture in the towns, the food, the wildlife, the boating, hiking.
All of that. And then woven through it is this complex ongoing story about water quality, about the connection between the land and the water, and about people trying to find solutions.
It really makes you think, especially that point about the watershed being so massive, stretching hundreds of miles upstream. When you consider that the health of Lake Pepin depends on what happens so far away, what does that really tell us about how connected everything is? And how maybe our actions, wherever we happen to live, can ripple downstream?